Good morning. See, technology, unfathomable. So when I was invited to come and speak here, obviously you do a little digging around about the kind of community of practice that you all are. And just speaking to Simon there, it gives me a sense of the kind of roles that you're in. I understand that the acronym used to mean something, but now in terms of your roles is so diverse within a university. And I think that's the nature of change over the past few years, is the roles have shifted and the kind of services that you'll be providing will be very different from those that you provided 5 years ago, and are probably very different from those that you'll be providing in another 5 years. So hopefully what we're going to talk about together this morning will give you some kind of framework to take forward within your role now, but also within your roles a bit later on. So I've really framed this around a question. The discussion with academic staff is about them questioning. And my contract is an academic contract. I'm one of the very few heads of e-learning that's an academic in the university. And that's strategic. That's because I have an academic reputation in the university and I can connect those conversations together. My real role is this. And I'm in the process of negotiating a change of title because I think that indicates the kind of things that you do. But the kind of work that I do is around what I call digital pedagogy, this kind of nature of the relationship between the technology and the learning and the teaching, which is so vitally important. I was scanning your posters around the room here, and it talks a lot about your customers, whoever they might be, and your stakeholders, whether that be staff or students. And so this question is very relevant. If technology is the answer, what is the question? Digital pedagogy for me is not about necessarily having to use digital technologies, but rather thinking about the approach to those tools from a critical perspective. So it's as much about using digital tools as deciding when not to. And that's an important thing for academics to understand, because the message strategically is that we should all use digital tools all of the time. But actually the reality is that we don't always need to do that. Learning and teaching has been around a lot longer than digital tools or digital technology, and we muddled along through that quite happily. So although I'm a big fan of digital technology, I don't think it's a requirement that all of our academic staff should use digital tools and technology all of the time. And that's the kind of approach or mindset that I think it's useful to have in your kind of role. Is not to tell everyone they must use technology, but to say to them, this is how you can use it, and this is why it's really, really quite powerful. For those of you that are on the Twitter sphere, that's me if you want to connect. I do a lot of my comms, a lot of my collaboration with people through that. But for those of you a bit old school, I also do have an email address, so you can email me as well. All of this work, you'll notice, is licensed. It's openly licensed for you to use and take away in your own institutions to use with people. So any of the resources today, you can go away and use as long as you give me some attribution. That's all I ask. So I'll make these slides available either through your website or through your connections. So my first dilemma was, okay, so the head of e-learning, I wonder if they expect me to use PowerPoint or not. I'm not actually technically using PowerPoint because I'm using Keynote on a Mac. But actually there is pretty much an assumption, isn't there? I came round yesterday and observed, I looked through the doors and I see this big screen here, and I see the lectern here, and I see all the chairs facing this way, and you think, there's a bit of a presumption that I'm going to come and do a PowerPoint talk. Because historically that's what we do. And that's exactly what our classrooms look like. But it's also exactly what our living rooms look like. Our living room has a big screen, normally a television, many of them now pride of place where the mirror used to be, above the fireplace, as a focal point for everything we do in the living room. And that's what happens in our classrooms. We've predicated this as the focal point of the learning, which is not right. And I know some of you are involved in space planning and kind of space design, and I am too, and I'm really interested about how we change the nature of that space, because it can be really unnerving If I came into this room actually and it wasn't laid out like this, I'd probably feel slightly unsettled. So we have to have a shift, but a very, very slow shift. So as a warm-up question, I've got a poll for you to do, and you will need to use some technology, I'm afraid. So you don't have to engage with this, it's not a requirement. If you have a web-enabled device, I'd like to know what kind of device you're using today. And you can respond in 3 different ways. The easiest way is the first one, is to go to pollev.com/digisim, and you'll see a selection of options there for you to answer the question. You can also text a code, whichever choice of yours, to it, and you can also tweet if you want to tweet. The thing about this is to recognize that we're all bringing these devices to a variety of places. And actually, a lot of our life predicates itself within the device and around the device. But very often do we actually effectively use those devices inside learning and teaching, for a number of reasons. So you can see by popular recognition, the tablet device is the king or the queen of mobile devices. And that's the kind of experience that we're having on our own campuses. You know, we're seeing a reduction in the use of laptops being brought onto campus, and our students say that's because they're too bulky. They've got them in their digs, they've bought them for university, but they don't bring them onto campus very often. The tablet device allows reasonable access to resource and material and learning and information, but also allows them to connect to their social lives at the same time. So they see this device as a cohesive single device for which they utilize for learning and teaching. And the smartphones just shot up as I said that. But for learning and teaching, tablet devices are predominantly being used more than the smartphone. So that's just to get you warmed up, because there's a couple of other polls in there, so that's like the test one. For me, what we need to be doing is taking ourselves on a journey. So taking our academic staff on journeys with us, and us undertaking our own journeys ourselves. Because if we don't take a journey, we're not going to get people to come on board with us. A journey should be about discovery. It should be about challenging people, yet rewarding them. And it should be exciting. It should have clear objectives. We should know where we're going. We should know the direction that we're heading towards. And I spotted a couple of your posters that sort of gave a flavour to that idea of what a journey might look like. Let the journey begin. And I think that is really, really important, to let people know when the journey is beginning. Because if you're planning a holiday and you're thinking about going on vacation for a journey, that is the most exciting part sometimes of the holiday. It's all of that planning and thinking about it and the lead up to it. So talk to people about what that feels like. And then the journey continues. So although you might get to a stage point and it might be the end of that particular journey, the reality is that you continue on to another one. And how do you link those journeys together so it feels more cohesive? So I want you to take 3 key things away with you today in order to take forward whatever it is you're doing in your own practice, in your own areas. And that is that you must have these 3 ingredients in order to be able to make anything change. People. People, you can't do anything without them. So they're a given. You must engage people. You must have a plan of action. There must be some action that's taking place in order to be able to manifest this change. And it's got to have impact. Now, sometimes it could be negative impact, but it must be able to have some impact somewhere to be able to talk to people about it. The most important of those 3 attributes is people. There's this brilliant quote by Diana Lauriard, who writes a lot about technology and pedagogy. And she says that transformation is more about the human and organisational aspects of teaching and learning than it is about the use of technology. And that is how academics think. That is how academics generally, I'm only generalising here, generally think about using technology. They see their pedagogy or their learning and teaching as fundamentally the most important part of their activity. And technology is a way of supporting them, whether that's in-classroom technology, whether that's class technology that the students are bringing on campus, whether it's technology we're providing for them. It's their teaching and their pedagogy that they're interested in. So the journey we have to take is a change journey, a journey around change. The psychology of change is quite interesting. I'm not going into any details, but Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did a 5 stages of grief model. And the 5 stages of grief are the stages that we go through when somebody close to us passes away. But the thing is, psychologists have begun to recognize that those same feelings are associated with the change process. And it's important that we consider that. If somebody you know has somebody close to them passed away, you would be very sensitive about the way you approach them. You'd be very kind and supportive. And in exactly the same way, we need to be doing that as well when we're talking about technology. I'm going to try and get us to physicalize and get a sense of what that is like, that change. So everyone needs to put their hands in the air and wiggle their fingers a bit. I mean, everybody, this doesn't require any technology whatsoever. And then you need to clap your hands together and then link your fingers and then put your thumbs together and hold your hands out. Now, some of you will have your left thumb on top and some of you will have your right thumb on top. Some people suggest that people with left thumbs on top are a bit sneaky and those with the right thumbs on top are a bit sexy. I'm not convinced by that. And if you have yours somewhere in the middle, who's to say? But the point about this is that's instinctive. Everybody's done that instinctively. Keep it together. So that is something that you've done instinctively. You didn't think about it, you just did it. I want you to observe what that looks like. And next time we do this, I want you to force the reverse. So I want you to force the reverse of the interlocked fingers, and I want your thumb to be opposite to what it is now. So if your right thumb is on top, I want your left thumb on top. Okay, ready to do this again? Okay, stretch fingers out, clap together, force it. Okay, what does it feel like? It feels awkward. You had to think about it. Yes? It feels a bit different. Doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel comfortable. Those are exactly the same feelings that people have when we introduce technology into their learning and teaching spaces. Technology that they're unfamiliar with. Technology that they're not experienced with. They're not confident like we are in the use of technology. They're not self-capable of problem-solving technology, which is why they require your support a lot. But we have to remember that, because technology to us, it's in our blood. It's something that we live and breathe on a daily basis. If I asked any of you to talk about the history of Gothic art, that would be challenging and disruptive and uncomfortable for many of us, because we don't live and breathe it. So you are experts in technology in the same way as they are experts in their subject area. And if we forget that, then the problem is we're never going to move along this change curve. We're never going to get them to move from this perceived negative change, oh dear, they've just introduced a requirement for all of us to upload our assignments to the VLE. Oh dear, they've just removed all of our OHPs out of our classrooms, which we did, and put in alternative electronic products instead. Oh dear, they've put smartboards in. Hang on, I'll not use them, it's okay, I'll just use it like a projector. So all of these things produce negative perceived change. They come into the classroom, it's different. They come into the library, it's different. A student comes on campus with a piece of technology, it's different. All of these things are really, really challenging. And what we want to do is we want to get them to move along the change curve here. At a point, we want them to let go. That's when they don't need us as much. They let go and they can carry on their journey on their own, supporting themselves. Now, there will always be members of staff that you'll never get to shift along this change curve. And if you want an acronym that you can take away, they're called CAVES. They are colleagues against virtually everything. All right? Those are the people that you shouldn't spend too much time trying to change. They will use a lot of your resource for very little movement, very little change, because they're just resistance to the idea of that change. The people that you really fundamentally want to get on board are not the evangelists, because they'll do that anyway. The evangelists are great. They're the people that will pick it up and run with it without very much work to do. New start academic staff are really key to get them on board, because they are the people that are going to progress through institutions and become strategists. They're going to progress, they're going to be in positions of power to make change. So a lot of the work that I do is on our PG-CAP, which is our postgraduate certificate in academic practice, where I get new academic staff and I get them on board with it and get them to roll with these changes. These are the kind of things that you've already picked up. This idea of negative thinking, quick, put the head in the sand. Okay, so I've got to do e-assessment. Oh, hang on. Is it still there? You know, these things don't go away. But how can we help people? And then technical issues. And this is, I think, part of the historical problem with trying to get people on board with technology, is the fact that sometimes it goes wrong. And it's like going on a snakes and ladders board, and they're just near the top. You know, there are 82 on there, and then there's just a snake on 85, isn't there? And they rolled a 3, boom, there they are again, back down to 40, because the technology has not worked for them. And you have to build that back up. We must begin to purchase technology that is fundamentally usable, not fundamentally more functionable. And there's a bit of work to do in the sector around that. A case in point is the VLE. How many of your institutions where you work has got some kind of learning platform? Keep your hands up if you chose that based on its usability. Just on its usability. 1, I want to speak to you, and I would like to speak to you. Because actually, when you look at the way that we procure technology, such as the VLE or the learning management system, we purchase it based on functionality. We basically have a list of criteria, and we go, oh yeah, Moodle can do this, Blackboard can do this, X can do this. But actually, what we should be doing is spending a year testing these products on site with academic staff and doing usability studies in order to make it more likely to be picked up. So let's go to poll 2. So you've done this once before, so it shouldn't be too challenging. I'll just switch it. Just bear with me. So just a couple of ideas from you about what makes people resistant to change. Wait for it to load in. See, this is where the technology fails me, and either have to just scoot along or go back to the web browser. Always have a backup. Even the backup's not working. See, look, web browser failed. This is what happens to academic staff on a daily basis when they rely on technology. So now this is a problem-solving exercise for me, isn't it? It's a good job that the polls aren't an integral part. I'm connected to Wi-Fi, but it's still not working. I will come back to it if I get a chance. So this is one of the fundamental problems about encouraging academic staff to use technology. I've not put that in as on purpose. It's just the reality of the nature of using technology. And I would like to think that I was technology competent or technology capable. But somewhere in here, the infrastructure or the setup has let me down. And when you're stood in front of 150 and 200 students, that's a bad thing to happen for confidence around the use of technology. It should be working straight away. So let's just go back to presentation. Presentation still works, so I suppose that's a benefit. If you want to vote on it, you can. If you can get to it, great, and I can come back to the poll's working. Just my laptop's decided not to display it. So if you want to do it, and it's there and up and available, you can go there. Otherwise, I'll just move on. I don't want to waste your time technically solving the problem. The next thing for me is about action. And this is about putting people and that change process into action. So resistance to change is the action taken by people when they perceive change to be a threat to their usual daily activities. So we've got to get people to change their actions through our own actions. And this for me is not about technology. This could be about anything at all. If you can get people to change, it doesn't have to be about technology. It is about a conversation. It is about talking to people at the beginning of the point of that journey. And one of your posters shows this idea as this continual professional development. And my job is to try and get academic staff to see technology as a continuing professional development requirement. They'll all go to conferences about their subjects, but they very rarely go to conferences about education technology. And that's what I want to encourage them to do. It goes back to this. Getting them to think about the fact that it's their teaching that is important, but actually technology can really, really help them. So what I'm going to propose to you now is a bit of a solution to that. There's a lot of problems there, and this is what we're doing at Leeds Beckett University. We've developed what's called a framework. This framework is designed to get people to think about technology and how it relates or interrelates to their learning and teaching. It's based around 4 fundamental questions. What can technology enable us to do that it couldn't do, that we can't do in our learning and teaching without it? How can it enhance what we already do within our learning and teaching? How can technology enrich learning experiences? So how can I use technology to connect globally overseas with another culture, to bring a different perspective to my classroom, is a good example. And the other one is, how can it empower learners and teachers? How can they use technology to really empower themselves, to find out about things, to gather data, to analyze data, and all of those things that you can't do without technology? Giving them a reason to use technology in their learning and teaching. So fundamentally, it's a very simple process. And so we take it right back to the conversation. On your tables are some of these. These are one of the tools that we use. You can choose to make it now if you wish. If you remember how to fold one of these, you can have a go and fold it. Excellent. Some people have done that already. And the idea behind it is we take these into workshops with course teams. And the idea is that we introduce this as a smart technology. Okay, this is a smart mobile technology. The thing that makes it smart is the user. As with any technology, the technology is not actually smart in its own right. It's clever, it's technical, it's got some quite complex architecture in there, but the reality is that this on its own is a very dumb device. But actually, the person makes it smart. And what we do is we go through that process of somebody selects one of the 4 E's, and then you say it, and then they select another one. And there's underneath some examples of the kind of tools that we have on the university campus, learning systems, and then underneath it are examples about how you might use that tool against the framework. And then what this does, this triggers conversations within academic teams where they start to plan out their use of technology using those 4 E's. Within every single one of our undergraduate courses, we now require our academic staff to write a section in their course approval document that describes how they're going to use the virtual learning environment and technology in their courses. And that's based around these conversations. It's not complex, this, but what it does, it's like having a coat stand. It's somewhere to hang their technology on and hang the pedagogy on in the same place. They can use those terms. This, again, is all openly licensed, so you can go to Leeds Beckett's site, you can download a copy of the framework, and you can use it in your own institution for your own activities. So this brings me on to impact in the last 10 minutes or so. Impact is the most important aspect. You can't have the journey, you can't have the conversation, and then not have any impact with it, because it's a waste of people's time. So people will see the flaw in that if you haven't shown any impact. If you think that you're too small to make an impact, try going to bed with a mosquito. All right? Every one of you in this room can take forward a change or make an impact, regardless of how small you might feel within your institution, within your department. Every one of you can make some kind of contribution to change. So what I want to do is now connect this kind of conversation to the reality of technology in our classrooms, just to finish off. So what happens when we begin to talk about that technology? And this is a bit about the delivering the technology bit. We've done the conversation, we've got a sense of what it can do, we've got some ideas, we've got some aspirations, we know what we want to do to enable, enhance, enrich and empower. Out of our conversations, we undertook a project around tablet devices. We wanted to get a real sense of what it was like when we had a strategy or a structure where we gave everybody in a course, staff and students, a tablet device. We wanted to know what that felt like. We wanted to know what we would get from it. The project was a partnership between the Students' Union and the Centre for Learning and Teaching. And we got some external funding just to help us with some of the evaluation. So we did 2 phases. The first phase is to set up the project structure so we know it's... And these are the kind of courses that we're involving. They're not all technology-based courses. There's lots of different people in there with different needs, with different expectations. So we've got computer forensics. You would expect them to be quite technically savvy. But we've got performance courses, hospitality, accounting, legal practice, physiotherapy. So a really good range of courses and a range of levels of study as well. So level 4 is first year undergraduate and level 7 is postgraduate. And full and part-time. So lots of different people that we're working with. We analysed the experiences of both our staff and our students. And what we were interested in initially was how people use these devices. You know, we've given them the device, we've used the framework to talk about the kind of things they could do within their classrooms, within their learning and teaching. And like any shiny new toy, most people, so this is the number of people at the bottom, used it daily. So we had roughly about 400 students and about 60 staff on this project. 75 staff over the 2 phases. So when you give somebody a shiny new toy, what do? Play with it all the time. So when you give them the toy, they're using their device daily. We've given it to them, and then when it settles in and embeds, you get a slight shift back down a little bit. So less people using it daily. But you can see that there's a really good use of that technology. We haven't told them how to use it. We've not told them they must use it in this way. We've given them the technology, we've given them the framework and asked them to come up with ideas. And the staff are using it daily or at least 4 to 5 days a week. The student experience is not dissimilar to that. Most of them start off using the technology daily. So we're asking them if they're using it on a daily basis, and then that slightly reduces. But what's interesting here, a lot of these students told us that they then reverted back to using their own device. Where the staff, we don't give our staff devices, and this is the first time they've had one. So they took this device and they used it a lot. but students took our device, said, thank you very much, that's brilliant, I'm going to play with it, and then they went, actually, I prefer my device, so I don't use your device as much. We also asked a question about how you use the device around personal or academic use. And on this scale here, the blue is represented by the staff, and the students are represented by the green. The closer you are to this edge is how much personal use you have of the device, so how much you used it for personal use. And this number 10 here is how much you used it for academic or study use. And you'll see that academics started to separate the use of the device and predominantly only used it for academic purposes. Our students were using it much more broadly across both their personal and academic experiences. Because staff are actually, if you think culturally ingrained, that this is your device for your work, this is your device for your social, personal life, and never the twain shall meet. We also ask questions like, have you used the device in a taught session? So did staff take the framework, did they have the conversation, and then did they decide how they were going to use these devices in their session? 60%, nearly 59% said no, they didn't. And a lot of that was around confidence. You know, they only had these for a semester. They didn't really have a lot to go on. But what was more interesting was when we asked the same thing to students, 77% of them said yes. So even though the academic staff have not designed anything around the use of that technology, the students are still finding uses for that technology in the learning and teaching. So we know that our students want to use these devices in their learning and teaching, and they are using those devices in learning and teaching. This is interesting because this is about confidence. So we asked staff over the 2 survey points how confident they were in the use of the device. In the first survey, you'll see very low scores of confidence. But in the second survey, nobody scored low in confidence, which suggests that if we give staff time to play with technology, they'll build self-confidence and more likely be able to use it. The next stage was to get them to articulate to us how the device had helped them do things that they couldn't do without it, in their opinions. And these are just some of the snapshot comments that came out of the survey. So we asked them to say, what has it enabled you to do? So you can guess which courses they come from, I think. But this one has enabled us to draft legal documents together at the same time. So they're using the technology alongside a system. We're using Google Apps here. So they've taken the technology now, which was a Google Nexus device, and they've worked out that actually we can collaborate on this document together at the same time in any place we want. That has enabled us to do that. That is a real selling point for the use of this technology. I'm able to learn at my own time, in my own choosing, in my own place. I don't have to be locked to a desktop PC to see this content. I'm able to instantly share material with students in formats that are accessible. So I can share a document straight from this tablet device to students. I don't have to come to a desktop PC or log in. They're using Google Hangouts to do remote feedback and supervision sessions. So students on placement are taking their mobile devices, going into placement, and their supervisor on campus is then having conversations with them on placement. But what we're seeing is a rationale for the use of that technology. They're buying into its use because they're explaining why and how they're using it. And again, the same with enhance. What is it doing to enhance your learning and teaching experience? And the same with enrich. What is it doing to enrich your learning and teaching experience? What is it doing to empower you as learners and teachers? What is this technology doing for your pedagogy? What is this technology doing for you? Not what can you do with this technology. So where are we now? We're using that kind of data to inform our strategies. So we're developing a bring your own device strategy, but alongside that we recognize that not everybody is coming on campus with a device, so we're making loan devices available through our self-service auto laptop locker system. So a student that can come on campus can join in with the technology-based activities by loaning devices out from us. We're also beginning to map every single module in the university against that framework and asking module leaders to tell us how they are using technology in their module or how they intend to use it. And that could be a piece of hardware, a piece of software, a classroom technology, could be anything that they consider to be technical. And that's going to help us identify the kind of support and resources we're going to need as a university to make that happen. Where are going to be the critical points where they need support and guidance? I'll skip the poll, it doesn't seem to be operating. But what we want to do is get to the point where we think, so technology may be the answer, not technology is the answer. But first we need to understand the question. And the only way we do that is through the conversations. The reality is it means slower incremental rollout of technology. We don't see an immediate big bang. We don't see an immediate change because we're not forcing everyone to do this. So, one takeaway. Always start with the conversation, never with the technology. We do want everyone to see eye to eye, but we don't want it to be a painful experience or a painful process for them. We want them to feel as if they've come on board with us, that we've taken a journey with them, and that we're supporting them in that process. We're not telling them that they need to do it or what they need to do. Thank you very much.